Good morning, students. I am Professor Rishi, Professor of Pedagogy from Shri Vishwakarma Skill University. And in the last two sessions, we were talking about the problem identification, and then we were talking about setting the objectives and hypothesis for conduction of the research. In the continuity, today we will talk about the literature review. And if we talk about literature review, first we need to understand literature, and then we will describe the review and why there is need of literature review, what are different purposes, we will talk about all that, then how the literature review can be conducted, and then lastly how it can be compiled in the form of a report of literature review. So, let us very first talk about literature. So, in research there can be number of meaning of literature in general sense, but because we are talking in the sense of research only. So, in research the literature is anything which provides knowledge or information relevant to your research, that may be the literature. Suppose someone is conducting a research in the archaeology, then whatever are the excavations received by the archaeologist, that can be the literature. But in case of legal studies, again whatever different armaments used for any crime can also be a piece of literature for a legal researcher, whereas in the social sciences, management and general sciences, the literature is different. But in general sense, literature is anything which will give information and knowledge for the conduction of study or for updating the knowledge, that is literature. Now, if we talk about the word review, means studying, understanding. So, literature review is process of, we can talk, literature review is process of, it is review process of examining, documenting and compiling the research data. It is first examining in the sense whether the particular literature or material is relevant to the study or not, then documenting it, recording it and then compiling it for the purpose of research, that is literature review. And the objective of literature review is the very first to update the knowledge. Suppose someone want to conduct research in a field and the knowledge that of that person is not updated in the field, or in other words, if similar kind of research has already been conducted and person is attempting to conduct the same research, then it would be a futile exercise. Generally research is conducted for creation of the new knowledge, number one. Number two, for filling up the gap in the knowledge, and number three, for the validating of the knowledge. In case we want to create the new knowledge, then yes, of course, it must be clear to us that already that knowledge is not existing. If you want to fill up the gap in knowledge, then in that case it means there is X knowledge available, but Y is not available and some other knowledge is available, or there is a gap in knowledge, that gap in knowledge needs to be filled up. That can be the second objective of conduction of research. Third one is to revalidate. Revalidate means already some research has been conducted and out of that some knowledge is created, but still there is doubt whether the created knowledge as a result of research is authenticated or not, validated or not. Then in that case we need to revalidate, and for the revalidation, among all these three different objectives, there is need to conduct literature review to update the knowledge of the researcher, number one. Number two objective is to find out the actual statement of problem, to establish the objectives and hypothesis of research, and yes, of course, to exactly find out the gap for which we want to conduct the research. That is second objective of literature review. Third objective of literature review is to support the finding of the research. When we will conduct the research, as a result of that we will reach to certain findings, whether those findings can be authenticated, can be validated or not. This can be done with the help of the existing knowledge, and existing knowledge is the literature. So, these are three basic objectives of conduction of literature review. Now, there could be different sources of conduction of literature review. Among them, the major categorization is the primary sources and the secondary sources. If we take example of primary sources, then in that various kind of reports, themes, conferences, publications can be included in the primary source, whereas in the secondary source we can include the newspaper, books, journals and the material available digitally or on internet that can be included in the secondary sources of literature review. Now, what are basic main sources? Basic main sources means if we are conducting research in literature, in humanities, among all disciplines, in management, in general sciences, medical sciences or technology, among all there are some key basic sources or main sources of literature which must be consulted, which must be accessed by the research scholar to conduct the literature review for the objective already I told you, that is for finalization of the research problem, for updating of knowledge and for supporting the findings of research. And these main sources are: number one, books. Books are very good source of literature review, because the existing authors, philosophers and people working in the field area, after conduction of their research by formal or informal ways, they express their views, they express their knowledge in the form of books. So, the books can be consulted for updating the knowledge. Second source is journals. Basically, journals are compilation of a particular discipline oriented research reports in a booklet form, and there are different journals available related to the different disciplines. Suppose someone want to conduct the research in the management area of human resource management. So, there are different journals related to specific topics, specific activities, specific processes of human resource management. So, these kind of journals should be accessed for updating the knowledge, for finalization of the research problem. And the third source is the magazines. There can be journal magazines, there can be magazines related to the specific discipline. In the case of management, in the case of sciences, in the case of medical sciences, in the case of all other disciplines, there are different type of magazines. So, these magazines can also be taken into consultation or can be accessed or can be studied before conduction of research or for supporting the finding of research. Nowadays, newspapers have critical analysis of nearly all different disciplines. We can take example of some of the newspapers like Times of India, The Hindu, Hindustan Times and among other languages also. These newspapers are bringing very critical and analytical views of research in the newspapers, and these critical and analytical views can be used for the purpose. Next is the research thesis. Research thesis are the management, research thesis are the dissertation, the MPhil thesis and the PhD thesis. These theses are the compilation of research reports. These research reports are very good source for updating the knowledge, for further identification of the problem, for setting the hypothesis and objective of the research. And yes, of course, these theses also give very good idea how research should be conducted, what kind of research design should be used. So, even the research thesis can be used for the purpose. And the next is research reports. Research reports means it is not only the researches are being conducted by the research scholars only. Government and other agencies, governmental and non-governmental, are involved in various kind of studies, and these studies are published into the form of the research reports. So, such research reports may also be used for the purpose. Besides that, lot many conferences, seminars and other academic activities are conducted where the research scholar and the people from discipline area, they pool their thoughts and ultimately they reach to the outcome of that conference, which can be concluded as the learning outcome of those conferences, and this material can also be used as literature for conduction of research or for finalization of the research. Besides that, the organizations related to a specific field area may also be involved in various kind of activities which records. Let us take example of medical organizations or medical institutions. So, daily patients are coming, their data is collected. Their data itself can be a source of literature review that gives lot of information. In the beginning I told you that what is literature? Literature is anything which is providing information and knowledge related to a specific discipline area and which can be used for conduction of research. So, organizations are involved. We can take example of ISRO. ISRO is doing lot of activities related to injecting the satellites in the space and various other activities, and these activities are recorded, and these records can be used for the purpose of research conduction as literature. And besides that, the encyclopedias and dictionaries. Sometimes we need to understand certain concepts, certain phenomena and certain terms and phrases which are hard to understand, and encyclopedias and dictionaries are a very good source of that. Then lastly, the electronic data and speeches related to the discipline area. Suppose the Prime Minister of India has given a speech on the economic condition of the country, or the budget speech given by the finance minister of a country can also be one of the source. So, similarly, the speeches given by the philosopher, the scientist and the people working in the field area can also be used for the purpose. And now, what are different steps involved in conduction of literature survey or literature review? The very first step is to identify the research problem. Even I will say, if someone want to identify a research problem, for that also there is need to go for review of literature. Without review of literature, without studying the literature, it is not possible to have updated knowledge about discipline area and to know what are challenges and problems faced by a particular discipline. Let us take example of agriculture. In the agriculture, nowadays lot many hues and cry in the newspaper and lot many publications among journals why people in the certain area of country are committing suicide. So, that can be a problem, and this problem can be studied through literature. Next is, after identification of the problem, the next step is identification of the literature. Suppose we have identified a particular problem, now which literature would be suitable? In the beginning I told you, if an archaeologist want to conduct a study, if a medical professional want to conduct a study, then there is need to identify the specific literature which will support, because the volume of literature available is so large. So, it is not possible to go through the whole. If the researcher will involve in that kind of activity, it will take a lot of time and it would not be possible to conclude the research within the stipulated time period. so for that purpose there is need to identify the literature, and once the literature is identified, there is need to organize that literature in the thematic order. Thematic order means the problem, objective and hypothesis of research will give us very good idea about the various themes, various factors, various variables involved, and the research methodology involved, and the research design involved, and the research procedure involved. According to all these different factors, which themes should come first and which should come next, or how we can develop a sequence, how we can organize the themes so that there would be a very good flow and coherence of the literature which we have reviewed. Then after thematic, we will exactly go topic wise, variable wise or factor wise, and once we have done that, we have ultimately finalized the themes and the core topics for which we want to conduct the literature review. We will go for compilation of topic specific. Compilation of topic specific means, suppose someone has taken 3 variables. So, now how literature should be compiled and how literature should be involved in that, then the topic wise specific material should be collected, and then how there will be coherence, compilation and integration as well as synchronization of the material, so that the literature will give us a very good idea how the researcher is going to solve the problem, what would be the objective of research, and on the basis of objective of research what hypothesis can be set, and once objective and hypothesis can be set, then what should be the research methodology. Research methodology means what research design should be used, and once research design is with us, then what would be the sampling technique or how the information will be collected, and then once this is collected or the sampling technique is available with us, then what would be the method of data collection, and once the data is collected, how the data will be interpreted. Literature will support us for all this, and once that understanding is there with the help of literature review, then with relation to the different factors, variable involved in the research, then what kind of material should be worked out and how it should be integrated. And with the help of this literature review, once we have collected the data, and after collection of data we have analyzed and interpreted the data, and we with the help of interpretations we have developed the findings. Now there is need to establish these findings, and the authentication, validation of these findings is possible with the help of again existing literature. So, this is criteria, this is process how literature review should be conducted, and once we have completed that process, the next step is the report writing or compilation of literature review, and that can be done in the form the various element of that are: number 1 introduction, number 2 review of literature, number 3 discussion of qualities and quantitative research, and lastly justification of the finding. Or in other words, if we want to write the introduction of a research, while writing the introduction of research, there is need to describe the various variable and factors included, and the description of all these factors is possible with the help of existing knowledge. Suppose we want to define any phenomena, so there might be different authors which have already defined it, and after defining it, if there is any theory, any model, any approach available related to that, so that should also be included in the literature. So, introduction part of the research will include introduction to the various factors of research, and this is possible with the help of the literature review. Here I want to share with all of you that if you are writing anything in the form of introduction, you are taking any material from anywhere in the literature review and you are compiling it, then certainly you must acknowledge it. If there would not be appropriate acknowledgement in that, then that material would be considered as plagiarized, and there are certain criteria for acknowledging the intellectual property depending upon the type of research. So, those criteria must be understood by the researcher and accordingly it should be acknowledged. Next part in conduction of research where there is use of literature review is review of literature chapter itself. After completion of the introduction chapter, now the researcher will uh, create or will compile a chapter of literature review, and in this literature review again what we had been talking in the last part, that compilation of topic specific material. So, in the literature review chapter we will go for topic specific literature review, and in that we will develop it in the chronological order or the factor order or the variable order depending upon need, type and size of the research, and accordingly the compilation will be made. Then if your research is a qualitative research or quantitative research, accordingly there will be need of research methodology, research design, sampling technique, method of data collection, then the statistical techniques required, all that can be learnt or all that can be reviewed with the help of literature. And lastly, you have if created the findings, these findings will be supported with the literature. So, before we go to the next part of it, there is need to talk about literature review and citation. Citation means acknowledging the existing use of knowledge in the conduction of your research as well as in compilation of your literature review chapter or review of literature chapter. So, in case of introduction, the criteria is either in the beginning of in the beginning of mentioning or using the material from literature, we will mention the name of author, year in which that material was created or that knowledge was created, its year, and then the material, but material should never be copied and paste, it should not be paraphrased, or the idea should not be stolen for the purpose of citation. A researcher will take care of that. In the case of literature review also, as for the purpose of study, researchers can use any material, but there are certain intellectual property rights or intellectual property instructions, those should be taken care, and in the part of discussion also appropriately there should be acknowledgement. And now coming to the main chapter or compilation of literature of review, then in that, in the beginning of that chapter, we should give brief introduction of your research and importance of literature review and what kind of literature has been accessed for the review of literature in the specific research. And then we will talk about the various variables and factors and phenomena included in the research and what different theories and models available related to that, and ultimately what is present status of the knowledge with respect to the available literature, that should be briefly discussed. And then moving to the main body of the chapter, there we will go either factor wise, variable wise, chronologically, that will decide depending upon the type, nature and size of the research, and after giving the complete comprehensive detail of existing knowledge related to the research, and after justifying the need of study, the gap in knowledge will be established. So, at the end of the literature review chapter, we will identify the gap in knowledge, and that gap in knowledge will justify the need for conduction of the research. Now, suppose we want to include a certain study in our literature review, then what various elements should be included in that? The very first one is the title of that study, what was that study. Second, who conducted that, name of the researcher or author, and in which year that study was conducted. And third thing included in that is the complete detail of the literature, that may be a book, a journal, a newspaper, a magazine. Its publication detail should be included in that. And next part which can be included in the literature review of a specific factor is why that study was conducted. So, the very first is the title of study, what was that study, who conducted that study, in which year, and where that study or where that literature is published, and what was objective of that study, and after that study what was type of that study, and then the details about sample, if by the way sampling is used in the study, and what was method of data collection should be included in that. And lastly, there is need to mention what were findings of the study. So, pairwise wise we can take, variable wise we can take the different researcher, their findings and what was study, and all whatever elements I have shared with, that can be taken into consideration. And this can be done for both the primary sources as well as secondary sources. And primary sources, the sources which have very fresh came into existence, and whereas secondary sources are which are already published. Now, coming how the literature review can be presented, there can be different criteria. The very first criteria is chronological order. Chronological order means we can start presenting the literature review or the researches in the chronological from past to present as well as from present to past, depending upon the significance. Whether past to present, past is more significant, then we can go from past to the present, or if it is from present to the past, then in that case yes, it would be present to the past. Then another criteria is broader to the specific. We can take the broader aspects first and then we can go to the specific. This can also be the criteria for compiling the topic or compiling the particular part of the literature review. Third one is major models to the minor theories. So, suppose there are number of theories, models, and already lot many researches have been conducted in the field area, then in that case we can go from major models to the minor theories, or again depending upon the significance, if some of the theories are very significant, then we can go from minor theories to the major model, the presentation can also be. And next criteria can be prominent authors to the non-prominent authors. When we will conduct the literature review, in that case there might be certain authors who have enormously contributed to the area, and there might be authors which have contributed significantly, but not in a large volume to the discipline area. So, depending upon that, the researchers who are very prominent in the discipline area and the researchers who have contributed slightly, so vice versa also it can be used. Then next criteria can be the contrasting schools of thought. There might be completely opposing approaches or opposing contrasting thoughts related to a specific discipline, specific topic. So, that can also be a criteria for deciding how the literature review can be presented in the chapter of review of literature. Now, the next part in this understanding the review of literature is what are different factors for writing effective literature review. Among them, the very first is whenever you are writing your literature review, it should be very specific. Specific means what was studied, who conducted that, in which year, and what criteria of sampling was used, and lastly what were findings. It should be very specific. It should be selective. You select only those element of literature which are most relevant and directly related to your research. When you will go for research, conduction of research specifically for your literature review, you will find a lot of material which you will consider that it is useful for your study, but there is criteria, it should be relevant, it should be related to your study only. A non-relevant material will unnecessarily destroy the structure of your review of literature as well as your study. So, the researcher should be very much selective in that. Next criteria for writing the effective literature review is the researcher should be focused to the research topic. Research topic will be considered as Gita, Bible and Quran of your research. Suppose you have collected some material and you are a bit confused whether it is relevant to your research or not. Immediately you access, you go to your topic, you try to understand your objective and hypothesis. These three elements will support you whether the collected material is appropriate for your research or not, and that will decide. And next is mention the sources of evidence. Whatever material you are taking, already I told you that if you are using any material, then you have to acknowledge it, and for the acknowledgement you must know the name of author, year of creation of that knowledge, and where that knowledge was published. These sources should be available. Whenever you will compile the material for literature review, you will simultaneously prepare this material for acknowledgement. And now after doing all that, the next part is you will start writing your report. For writing your report, it should be in very simple language, and whatever factors or whatever fact, information and knowledge you are including in that, that should be accurate, exact, correct. It should not be fake, it should not be non-authenticated, it should not be non-validated. And the next part in that is cite with references. So, whatever material you have taken from anywhere, very first it should not be plagiarized, and plagiarized means it should not be cut paste. Second, it should not be paraphrased. Third, it should not be the stealing of idea. And after doing that, even then you have to acknowledge by citing the references, and that you can do either by putting the footnotes, or you can give at the end of your research report, or you can give at the end of each chapter of your research report. And lastly, for writing an effective literature review, you need to follow the pattern that, and develop the coherence in that. So, this is how you will compile. Now, after compile, what is basic objective of conduction of research literature review is to create the gap in knowledge. After comprehensive literature review, the researcher will come to know that what various researches has been conducted and how much knowledge has been created in a specific discipline, then where is the gap. So, how gap can be presented after presentation of the complete literature review? The gap can be presented in the tabular form or the paragraph form. In the paragraph form, the researcher will write in the form of report by citing so and so researcher has conducted so and so researcher on the topic or on the so and so area, and findings were so and so. And then the researcher need to mention the relevance of that research with your study, and by this way the most relevant 5 to 10 researches should be mentioned and a conclusion should be prepared with reference to the study taken by the researcher, that so and so study has been conducted, but these studies have taken so and so variables and the findings are so and so, but the research being taken by the researcher is not doing that, it is different, and different is this, and so knowledge will be created, and this created knowledge will fill up the so and so gap. This can also be presented in the form of table. Tabular form means a table can be prepared where the name of author in one column, the date on which it was done, and then what was study can be the next column, and then what were the finding of study, and last what was relevance of this study with your study, and in the columns you can write all that, and among the rows you can pick up 5 to 10 different authors, and lastly at the bottom of the table you can conclude in the paragraph form that how there is gap in the knowledge. So, again, with the various steps how research can be conducted, we will conclude this session. The very first, we will identify the research problem, we will formulate the research question, we will take the background of that, and we will focus and refine on the topic. Then we will go for the extensive literature survey, and then we will finalize the objective and hypothesis, and then we will prepare the research methodology, which will include the research designs, survey methodology, and the method of data collection, and then the statistical tools used, and lastly we will go for again developing the findings, and once findings are available, literature survey will again support us for validation, and this is complete process of literature review, conduction of research. So, thank you very much for patient listening. I hope that you might have understood it. In the next lecture, we will come up with another topic in continuity, how to conduct the research. Thank you very much.